Welcome to another episode of ExecuBalance. Thank you for joining me today as we dig in and try to find different tips and tricks from some busy executives on how they balance their life. My name is Chad Crowe. I'm the host of the podcast as well as CEO of techwood.digital. I'm a father of 4 and a husband to 1, and so I know what it's like to have to struggle to find balance. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I hope you enjoy this episode. Thanks for joining us. Today, I'm pleased to have Ben Lemmen with us. Thanks for joining.
Absolutely. I'm happy to be here.
So, Ben, you are a freelance and a DP, so you do a lot of awesome creative stuff, right?
That's right. I'm a freelance director of photography, kind of balance and oscillate between those a little bit. Work for other directors, shooting, on the DP side, and then take on my own projects and direct those.
Awesome. So yeah, we were talking before. I'm excited because you're in a younger demographic and somebody that I haven't had the chance to really talk to about. And so I think we're in for a treat. And one of the secret roles I already know you have is fiance to an amazing person who happens to work at Techwood as well.
That's right. So Kelly and I are getting married later this year in August. And we are super excited. I mean, it's the forefront of everything we're talking about right now. So we've been together a little over 3 years, and we're pretty pumped.
Yeah, she goaded you into talking to me.
Yeah, yeah, and so she works for Techwood and just started up this year. So
yeah, and we're so excited to have her and excited for you guys too. It's going to be an amazing venture. When at Techwood, we don't. I don't view it as we're just hiring just the one person. We're hiring kind of a family. And we're the people that are those attached to. So I'm really excited to have you in the family as well as
That's
Kelly.
Awesome.
So so it's going to be awesome. So I think that's kind of where we know each other from and how we've gotten to here. I think to get people to know you more, let's run through some of the roles you have outside of director of photography and so fiance and anything else you have going on.
Sure. Yeah. So, like you said, and just to kind of plug, I've listened to a couple of episodes and gotten so much out of the people you've had on. And so when you asked me if I wanted to be on, I was like, yeah, but I haven't written any books and I don't run an organization or a church or anything like that. I run a business of one. But that being said, a lot of my roles right now that I see is obviously fiance and just preparing for marriage and really in the middle of that season. And then with that comes, becoming an uncle and, becoming a brother-in-law and a son-in-law and stuff like that. So there's a lot of exciting, changes and roles that I'm stepping into, as well as I've got an older sister and, 2 parents that I remain close with. And that is, a big part of my life too. I feel blessed to just have a lot of relationships too. I live in Holland, Michigan, small town. There's not a ton of creative scene, but everyone knows everyone. So those relationships for me, just beyond just work, but, caring for people where we wind up in different spheres is important to me too.
Yeah, I think too, an awesome role that I feel like you fill, that we haven't even talked about is just that, the creative person, that uber, creative person. I've seen some of your work. It's awesome. You've worked for amazing brands. You got some great video out there. Thanks. Feel free to drop a hint where people can find them, because I think that not because of promotional, because I think they're awesome to watch. They're fun, like that the guitar one that you did. Like I just enjoy watching it. It gets me pumped.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And anyone who does creative work just knows hearing that means the world, because when you put something out into the world, that's not often the state of mind that you're doing that. So I do appreciate that. And I've got my work on a website, just benlemmen.com, and people can check it out there.
Awesome. I think that's kind of an area to dive in first, is in your role of creative. I think that sometimes has for me at least, it has this kind of conflict with my role of trying to be a business person and get a project done and make sure it gets billed.
Yeah.
And so do you have any conflict between those 2 roles of, creative person and person who needs to get the project done?
Yeah, totally. And even going back, so I went to college, and my school didn't have a film program. I really went to college. Well, DSLR cameras were, basically had a friend bring us to the dorm, and I just stole it, to make stuff, every other night. And but in that process, I studied history. And I really caught a passion for the storytelling side of history, and diving into real stories, and having the responsibility to communicate those in a compelling way, in an accurate way. And so those kind of merged throughout college for me, which I feel like has given me a great, a solid and a different foundation towards the craft of filmmaking. But as far as jumping into the commercial space, and right off college, kind of had people who wanted me to film their weddings. So I just kind of became a wedding videographer, which was perfect. It's what I needed. It was a pressure cooker for how to make videos, but I never had any business acumen or experience or mentorship, really. And that was really hard at the beginning, and it wasn't until a couple of years in where I realized that the ability to do what you love for a living still involves the living side of it, and and in this context, it's an interesting balance about between like having this really, really clear passion. I feel like I have a really clear calling for what I've been gifted at, what I like doing, and what I want to continue learning at. And then on the other end, that there's really not a solid path for a lot of people in creative spaces to know what that next step is, and to know what things need to be concrete, and kind of how to build the architecture of the business that you want to have in order to do what you love and what you're passionate and committed to. And I think that's where, that honestly has led me to a lot of a lot of tough places, and to have that out of balance can just be really tough for your identity. And I have had years where it's just been in a funk around that. And what's been exciting in the past year has been gaining some of that knowledge and life experience. I'm coming out of my 20s. I'm 29, and really looking at at the future with a little bit more excitement. And obviously, still running a business is extremely challenging, and filmmaking is challenging as well. But I do feel like I have a little bit of a little bit more of a clear foundation. Yeah.
You're getting there. I think that's something to dive into again. Like, I'd love to know, kind of what were some aha moments, or some tips, or some tricks, or just things that you've done as you've gotten there. It's like, management wise. So I think that's a fun place to go. But first, I have a fun anecdote. You said you started, you're 29.
Yeah.
Started college at DSLs.
Yeah.
So when I went to college, it was only 7 years ago, and while I was at college was like the whole shift from film to DSLR.
Oh yeah.
Like, I actually would like go into film and develop photos and all of that, and then the next year it was everybody had a DSLR. Like, it was crazy.
Yeah, it really blew up, and it opened up a lot of doors for people to make videos and make content, and there's different camps on whether that has been a positive thing or not, but in my view, I think it's opened up a lot of doors and democratized the industry in a way that just wasn't there when the only way you could make a movie was if you had a 35 millimeter film camera. So
that's nuts. So yeah, so just backing back up then, so from the doing what you love to doing what you love to make a living, what was something that propelled you into the I've got to figure out the make a living part more so?
Yeah, totally. I think the biggest thing was figuring out how what my value was monetarily, like what
to charge,
what can I provide, and what should that cost. And being a good Midwestern boy, I tend to maybe undervalue and want to be a little bit more appeasing to things that ultimately are not sustainable. And I think that's a big word there, is sustainability, and the ability to find a way to just keep, play the long game on this. And unfortunately, I see a lot of, with that whole, democratization of film, and everyone can have a camera and make awesome stuff. That's great. But unfortunately, more often than not, a lot of my friends just have gotten burnt out, and I've gotten burnt out. And that's not a great place. I mean, everyone knows that's just not a good place to be in your life, and that throws off so much in your life. And so for me, I think the biggest shift for me was saying, like, hey, I've got to figure out a way to make this sustainable. Basically, there's a book that was really helpful to read from, it's called Doesn't Have to Be Crazy at Work. It's the folks at Basecamp, David Heinemeier Hansen, Jason Fried. I follow a lot of their stuff, but one little line in there that really caught me is just, they say, calm is found in the black and in the business world. And so when you are in the black, that's where calm is found. And that's not to say, like, it's kind of this shift from, like, just chasing profits to make a lot of money to, hey, I need a sustainable way to continue doing what I'm doing. So for me, I've tried to apply that to what I do, and having my rates down, having really doing the work to know how to charge the right amount for what I'm doing, and value that.
And where the next thing is coming from too, right? Like, that's once you know exactly what your value is, and you charge that, and you do an amazing project, it doesn't just magically happen. Next one.
Exactly. And that's another thing is, for me, realizing that my work is ultimately, I'm only as good as the last project I did, because that's what people are often seeing, and I put my work out there, and that's what's generally getting me the next job. And so it's this, I cannot run off the hype or the brand of what I do. It ultimately does have to come down to being able to execute and do quality work, because the work is very public. You're putting it out there, and people are going to see it. And
nobody has secrets anymore.
And so that really does need to be the driving force for the decisions and the choices you're making as a business owner. Is this the work that I should be doing and pursuing?
Yeah, I'm going to throw a bit of a curveball at you. You've mentioned the democratization of film content, and kind of society, how that's changed certain things, and better or worse, different opinions all over the place. I think that's a reoccurring theme for a lot of things. The news industry, it's democratized. Blogs democratized newspapers, basically. And social media did it even further. And so I think with that has come a level of responsibility that, unfortunately, I think gets neglected by a lot of people. How do you remember the responsibility of a content creator, as a storyteller? What do you feel that your responsibility is ultimately when you're crafting things, and how do you stick to that?
As a storyteller, I think ultimately, storytelling can do three things. It can help people clarify something. It can build empathy between people, and it can direct people towards action. And for me, those have been kind of core components of when I'm going into a project or have an inquiry about a project. That's been a bit.
Run through those one more time.
Yeah. So, stories can help clarify something. You can something you didn't know about. Can give you knowledge that you wouldn't have had on there. One of the biggest things I think that we see is stories they build empathy, and through expressing emotion that we can all receive, and kind of giving access to emotions that maybe we don't feel super comfortable sharing in our day-to-day life. That's why movies make people cry, and change people. And then thirdly, I think they can there's a motivation factor, and I think that's what a lot of brands try and harness, because obviously there's usually an end goal with kind of the marketing that we've seen emerge that is based around storytelling or kind of, you know, some aspects of cinema.
I don't think you know how big that of a nugget that is, right? Like clarity, empathy, and action, motivation.
Yeah.
Clarity, empathy, and motivation. Because it's big for the storyteller. But I'm sitting here thinking, like, my background is a master's in strategic communications from a journalist school, journalism school. And you study the narrative paradigm of, you know, all of communications as stories. Mm-hmm. Like that little nugget, knowing that when you speak, you can do those three things, or you can deter from those three things.
Yeah, totally.
And in any narrative that you're speaking, like that's, you start to think about what that means for your all hands employee meeting. You know, like for companies who have 3 employees to 200 employees, you know, you're telling a story when you're standing up there saying something. Right. And are you achieving one of those 3 things? Are you deterring from one of those 3 things? I think so many people don't put the effort in to think about that. Yeah. I just think that's a huge responsibility that we have as communicators. I think it's something huge for you as a storyteller that you're able to think and boil it down to that. And how do you stay true to, okay, the story I'm writing right now, is it doing one of those things? And is it doing one of those things to a level where it aligns with the values of who I am or who I'm representing?
Right. Yeah. And if I can share just like a quick story, you know, really one of the first experiences I had with someone else's story was, you know, freshman year of college. I was really not a great student. I had gone to college to play soccer. I was pumped about that. And I really didn't have a ton of direction, but I was given an assignment for a freshman class to interview somebody about war. You know, it was a class on war. And I had just it kind of popped into my mind. My dad's mom was in the Netherlands during World War II, and was about between 8 and 11 around that time, so has, you know, recollections. And I just kind of known that. I was like, oh, we've talked about that a little bit. So I just asked her to, you know, go out for coffee, and pulled out my laptop and started recording and asked her some questions because I had to write a paper on it. And that was really moving to just realize that simply creating the space for someone to share something. This was, this was someone who was close to me and close to our family. But because she had immigrated to the United States, and this is a lot of immigrants, you know, stories with kind of direct family, is like they kind of want to just talk about being American, you know, and so no one really asked, and it was just kind of old stories from the past, but just seeing the memories come back to her, and sort of, you know, jumping into, you know, ditches and wow. Her dad, you know, had SS storming their house because her dad was working for the underground, and stuff like that was just mind blowing. And all that to say, so I went through that. That was wrote the paper, sent that to my family, and about 5 years ago on Instagram, I think I just kind of posted a recollection of some of that conversation. And I had a teacher at a school here who I, you know, knew, but she had just reached out. She said, "Hey, I'm teaching a class. Can your grandma come and talk?" And so we went and talked to this class. My grandma was super nervous, but I sat down and I said, "Okay, let's figure out how to formulate this, you know, and here's what we have. We have 45 minutes, and let's try and, you know, work this out." So it's, and that's essentially just what I'm doing with videos too. So, but anyway, so we go to that class, she talks, there's a kid from West Africa in the class, and you see his eyes just light up when she gets to the part about how hard it was to immigrate to the U.S., and you see them connect, and they're talking after class, and there's a girl who comes up, says, "My grandpa was in the Netherlands too during this time." And I say all that to just say the space to tell a story, and I think why stories are so compelling in the marketplace, and often get hijacked in different ways, is because they just share themselves, because there is such universal connection that can happen through someone sharing their experience or their story in a way that in a well-crafted way. And so that really gave me my first motivation. I've just kind of been trying to run with that since.
Dude, that's an amazing story. Oh my God. Yeah. Like you think about it, like that's why that stories exist, is to inspire and to do those things. And then you start thinking of, okay, I've got a job to do today. I got to go set up this shoot. It's going to be a long day. I'm tired. And then versus you flip that to, I'm gonna get to tell somebody's story today that's going to live for a long time. This story is going to live on past them. It's going to be a legend that creates value and impact well beyond today. And like when you can boil it down and look at things in that context, it changes your day.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, oh God, I'm going to go create some awesomeness today that's going to be around forever versus I've got to go do tactical.
Yeah. Yeah. It's an honor ultimately for to be able to, sit down for an interview and interview someone. Ultimately they're providing a sense of vulnerability in a lot of cases. And when you can get to that, it's an honor then to be able to create. And it's much less about how you do it and kind of all the tricks of the trade and stuff, but that's what it boils down to.
That's a nugget, is create space for stories. One of the things that when I told people I was starting a podcast, I asked a couple people for advice, and a couple of people, the biggest advice, I think reoccurring advice I had was just shut up and listen. Like,
great advice.
Let somebody else talk. Like it's gonna be great. You'll be amazed at what comes out.
Yeah.
So far, I've tried to be true to that, and I think just some of the stuff that's been shared, it just blows my mind. The experiences and the thought and the intentionality people put into their lives.
Yeah, I think we all crave that. It's not. It's not a normal part of life, and to hear a story and to experience a story is it's a two-way street when you're really listening to it. I've huge respect for documentarian Ken Burns. Huge respect for him, and he has a masterclass thing, and one of the things that he stuck out, and I wrote it down, was he was talking about his dad. His mom died early. His dad was not emotionally accessible to him. His dad did not cry when his mom passed away, but he said, but my dad cried when we could stay up past our curfew and the movies we watched. That's when my dad cried. And he kind of boiled it down to he felt like the stories that they were entering into let his dad have access to emotions that he was not able to access for whatever reason. But that's the power of those stories, is seeing something that is so specific and unique in someone's story and experience, but yet somehow it has a completely universal connection that just goes and it just shoots out in ways that we really cannot control. So I think that's pretty cool.
That's amazing. I think let's take a shift from curating other people's story to your story a little bit more. Sure. You've got a wedding planning and a fiance, along with a budding career.
Yep.
How are those two overlapping for you right now?
Yeah. So Kelly and I have a lot of our conversation going into marriage is what our values are going to be in terms of life, family, and work and career. And I think we've had experiences in our early 20s and in our 20s that have been hard to navigate, or just have gotten us off balance on that. And so for us, it's just a conversation about what are we doing to stay communicating and stay in a healthy place with that. A couple of things that I've done recently is I was feeling with some other just work experiences, really starting to feel burnt out And that started to affect my health and the choices that I was making around my health. So I, in October, got a health coach, and that has been incredible to have someone else to not, they're not babying you. They're ultimately like, your health is your choice. That's the bottom line. But to give some tools and some practical goals around how much water I'm drinking, or like what I'm choosing to eat, or what kind of movement I'm doing, has been, along with going back into freelance and having a little bit more autonomy in that I am my only employee. But that's been great to be introspective and say, well, what happens if in 5 years I have 3 people working for me, or what happens when I step onto a set for a shoot and there's 12 people around, to say, well, if it's not working for me, then it's not working for other people, that I might be put in a position of leading. So stuff like that, just really practical. That's been really great. And Kelly and I have had some conversations just around how we want to continue that and continue having, building our marriage and our home life not centered around our careers. Another thing is just right when I went freelance, I tried doing the working from home thing, but that's something that I've just found it creates unhealthy habits for me. And so, and it's obviously cheaper, like to have all my computer and stuff at home, but I rent out a small office space, and it's an expense, and it works right now. But that has been critical to leave all of my gear, all of my computer stuff there. And it's across town, it's a 10-minute drive away. So if I need to work on something and upload something or get something done, like I have to, it's an inconvenience versus becoming second nature at home to pull that out and work till midnight every night. So.
Yeah, no, again, as being intentional in crafting and setting up the story you want to create.
Yeah.
When you get married at 11, you mentioned kind of making sure that you guys are aligned core values-wise. I think that's huge, right? Like you can't have a story that runs all over the place. You have to have a story that has direction. And so core values is a good way. People give their companies direction. I'm a proponent of, it's a good way to give everything direction. And I don't think I do a good enough job at home with like, here's our core values as a family. But I think that would be very valuable for us. I'm weaker. We have one value, right? We're gonna glorify God in whatever we do. Like the decision we make, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do that. Mm-hmm. Everything else doesn't matter. Like I could totally expand on that a little bit more, but
yeah.
What are some of the values that you and Kelly have talked about or thought about? Or
I think our spiritual lives, at our core, are going to influence our relationships and really every aspect of our lives. And so that's huge for us, and as well, I think. A lot of it just in the context of this year has been like helping each other in each other's passions and directions and being there. I think it can be really lonely to make a job switch. We both made job switches during a pandemic year, and that's hard, and it's equally hard if you feel alone in it. So for us, and Kelly's been super supportive of my work, and my work often has me traveling or really long days, if I'm shooting, and she's just been super gracious with that. We've had follow-up conversations I just had a shoot that was about 12 days and I was gone for 12 days, and we're not married yet. We're living separately, so we're still kind of in that mode. But I just asked her, I was like, what is that going to look like when we are married? Like, how do we want to approach that? Like, what kind of heads up do you need? Like, how can we get creative? Is there any way that we can figure out ways to have experiences together in some of that, if that does continue? And so just, I think that communication for us has been helping form those values for us around.
That's work. Awesome. Got to talk about it. You can't get on the same page if you don't talk.
Yep.
That's amazing. Very exciting time for you guys. So you are probably the person closest to dating, like
Yep.
the dating realm that I've talked to, what is the experience of balancing a career and dating these days? I don't know. I got married to somebody I met in college. Like I've never had to
Yeah.
balance that.
Yeah. Oh man. Well, it's been refreshing. So Kelly and I worked together for an organization when we started dating like right before that. I actually didn't know she was interviewing for the job when we started dating, and so that was kind of funny. But our whole dating life has been centered, and when I say centered around work, to the point of not actually being super healthy. And so it has been extremely refreshing for us to have different jobs. And I don't really know what Kelly does, on a day in, day out basis. So I get the chance to ask and be curious, and we're not, we're not leaving the office at 8 p.m. together. It's like we find time after work. And again, I created, I leave my studio. She does not come over to the house where I've been working, and stuff like that, to just kind of, have a way. And it's been refreshing to have a way to, have our own personal work lives and then get the invitation to share into that, has been, really, really, really good.
Yeah. I think, if I was the minister giving you your marriage counselor and you were like, oh, well, we worked together for a little while, I'd be like, all right, we're good. you guys made it through that. There's nothing else to teach you guys. You guys survived.
Yes, that's true. It definitely, I think, put us on a good track with how to just talk through our relationship and grow closer to each other in the right ways, which has been good.
I love the nugget of like being intentional to make sure you guys have something to talk about together. As y'all have gotten separate jobs, it's like you naturally now have some, a topic to get around and huddle around that the other person doesn't fully understand. I'll tell you one of the things for me, and as when I was married and into my career, my first job, my wife would call while I was working a lot, and I would answer, and not really, too inhibiting, but what I found was like when that happens, it's like, okay, I check in, here's what I've done so far, and then it's a hang up, and then you walk in the door at the end of the day, and it's like, well, what do you want to talk about?
Yeah.
Right. So, having and keeping those things in a place where you can create an intentional time to talk about it in person, not just over the phone, is huge. And then I would say, through travel, that's one of the big things I think that helps me and Sarah stay connected while I'm traveling, is having an intentional time set apart to where, I'm talking to her about our days.
Yep.
The kids aren't around, which is a whole new ball game. When that starts happening.
Yep.
And so, intentional about having the conversations and what you're going to do. So
yeah, absolutely.
What's the next big things for you, man? Where are you headed?
Man, I am working on post-production for a couple projects. So I've been in, I call it my editing cave a little bit. So it's been good, and definitely just a season of kind of buckling down on that. And then I'm really excited. I've as we start having vaccinations come through and stuff starts to pick back up, I've had quite a few organizations and businesses in the area reach out looking to tell stories and tackle different videos around their brands and stuff like that. And so that's been really exciting to kind of put a lot of times I'm putting on my producer hat and doing that and selling videos and then making them, getting them done. And what I love is that, ultimately I am my only employee, but filmmaking is such a collaborative experience. So you have these intense, when you're on a shoot, you are intensely connected to the people that you're working with. And it's important to have people that you trust and ultimately like being around for 12, 13 hours a day, So as with any job. And so that's been a good balance because I am quite introverted, and so it's been nice to have a little bit of a retreat and a little bit of ability and autonomy and freedom that comes with, running your own business. But then I do love jumping on even other people's sets and, helping out with other videos has been super fun to just collaborate in that way and have this balance of like, when you're directing, you're really running the show. When I'm DPing, I am pushing a director's vision forward for them, and I'm trying to grasp that, and to be able to put those two hats on for me is really fun. I'm trying to simplify a little bit what I want to do. So I recognize that directing photography, working with light, working with cameras is something that I really love. That's part of the craft that I really love. And I also really love stories through the lens of a director or through interview-based content. And so trying to simplify and say, hey, those are really the two things that are gonna really fuel my passion. So let's focus on that, and let's spend less time focusing, for me personally, on a lot of the marketing world around that, and trying to be the expert in the room on the craft of how to pull those through, and working and collaborating with people who are a little bit more aligned towards that space.
Awesome. And that, along with a honeymoon period now, right?
Yeah,
it's all going to get easy now.
Yeah,
for the next year, and then no,
exactly.
And then you start getting upset about the toothpaste left on the counter.
Yeah. We're trying to book a honeymoon. We don't know where we're going yet, but we want to go to Hawaii, but we can't even. I don't even think you can get a ticket to Hawaii right now. We'll see.
Good luck.
Yeah,
Yeah.
We'll see. Maybe maybe it'll be somewhere later, but we'll see.
Well, I think amazing nuggets on intentionality and storytelling as a communication tool. I think and making sure you have space for stories and the impact that can have on society and on people. And it's crazy because making sure you have space for storytelling with your fiance or your wife at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
It's 100% the exact same thing. You're creating space for her story in that moment, and for you guys to be able to connect
and for me to leave a reserve to do that. Because if I'm doing that 100% of the time and consumed with the work stories, you got to recognize that at the end of the day, and a lot of what I do commercially is being able to separate the art versus the commerce of it. If we're doing a guitar ad, there's some cool stories in there and you get to tell some meaningful stuff. But at the end of the day, you're selling guitars, or at the end of the day, you're selling whatever it is. And that is the major goal of it.
Those guitars sell themselves.
That's true. But all that to say is, like, for me to separate, like, hey, that was really emotionally, I put a lot of emotion into this work thing, and I need to make sure that my passion for learning about Kelly's story and our story together, I have enough reserve to do that.
I joke with my business partner Jack sometimes, and we talk about, man, I have like a word bank that I can say and a word bank that I can hear every day, and there is a limit. And I just need to make sure I don't hit the limit before I walk in the door.
Totally.
And so for us, it's like, okay, how many meetings do you have today? You have 8? No. You got to, Chad, you got to figure out how to back that off. You can't.
Totally.
You're going to hit your word bucket. You got to.
Yeah. I think everyone overestimates what our capacity is. That's been a big learning for me, is making sure I'm realizing that I need to intentionally be conservative about the creative capacity that I have as a single individual, and that's not like a limiting mindset. I don't want to like frame it that way. I'm not saying like, well, I just can't do this, or I can't do that. But it's like an offset to my my default, which is like, well, yeah, I could just pull an all-nighter. I'll pull that off, and that was college for me, like 3 days a week. But you cannot keep doing that. It goes back to just sustainability and keeping it there.
So me and Sarah, we've had this conversation. She loves the book, Boundaries.
Okay.
And she talks about boundaries. Do you have healthy boundaries and stuff like that? I hate the word boundaries. It just sounds weird to me. I mean, whatever. But the concept I get. I like the word boundaries. This doesn't sit well with me.
It's kind of a buzzword.
I like pushing boundaries. But to me, as a creative individual, there was a moment in my career and a moment in my thinking, because I'm also creative, in where I resolved that guidelines, boundaries, rules, whatever you want to say, they're not limiting factors as much as they are creative, inspiring factors, right?
Yeah.
Like if you have no rules and you can think wide open, anybody can do that.
Sure.
But if you have rules and you have to think how to solve it, how to tell the story, how to create something within these guidelines, that's creativity.
Yep.
And so for me, there was this really revealing moment of, you know what, rules and guidelines, like you can embrace them. And especially in online marketing, when you're talking about click-through rates, you got to stick to this price, you got to do these and these. These are all like areas to allow me to creatively flourish.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, that is 100% with filmmaking and really with anything. And even putting limitations in place for your work or your life has that effect of, it forces you to become creative, and it forces you to look at things in ways that you haven't. And so that's a lot of the decision making around. That's why I love DPing and directing. I mean, I'm in control of every part of light that hits the lens. That is what you control. And oftentimes there's limitations on where you're shooting, on what lights you have, on what your camera can or can't do. And it's all about knowing what those limitations are, and having a good grasp of them. And that's what makes a good image.
And we'll leave it with that, like an allegory for life. It's like
Totally.
No, and that's what you were saying, was by setting these guardrails for myself, letting my creativity figure out how to keep it in there, whether I need a health coach, whether I need to be intentional about story space for me and my wife, and all of those things. By having those guardrails, using creativity to work within them, and being impactful in a healthy way for you.
Totally.
And using your strongest gift, your creativity, to keep yourself in line. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, I thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for your openness and sharing. I really do appreciate it. And yeah, like this will be a story that lives on, that I hope lots of people find value in for a long time to come. So thank you so much.
For sure. Thanks for having me on, Chad.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.